Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Femme in STEM roundtable discussion. I'm here with a host of really great people who are in the STEM field and various industries and disciplines, and we're here to give a little bit of a background and some information about what it's like to be femme in STEM, and a little bit about what it's like to be part of this community and work in STEM. So, pull my slides up. Boop. So just a quick content warning, things might get a little bit spicy. The various industries that we're in are kind of known for some interesting happenings that may not be super exciting, or I mean, they're exciting in a way, but they're not necessarily pleasant. So I just want to give a quick CW, TW for the content that we're going to be discussing, potentially workplace traumas and abuse. We're going to probably try to keep it not super wild, but potentially spicy. All right, we can go around and introduce ourselves. And so what we can do is, let's see. So please tell us a little bit about, please tell us your name and then a little bit about the industry that you're in and what you do. So I can kick us off. My name is Sarah. I also go by Bread. I go by Bread First Search on Instagram and basically everywhere else. It's a pun on the Breadth First Search, which is a computer graphing algorithm. I am a software engineer. Specifically, I do site reliability engineering, which is kind of an operations take on software engineering. So basically what that means is we handle making sure that things are operational in the wild. If it goes down, or fuck, I wasn't supposed to say my employer. If something happens with one of our services, we're responsible for making sure that it stays up. Likewise, the particular kind of engineering I do, we're known for cussing a whole bunch. So in an attempt to represent that, I may be cussing a little bit. Anyway, the next person can introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Joe. I go by Octave Kitten on Instagram. I went by Octave Kitten on LiveJournal way back in the day. I am a synthetic organic chemist. I actually specialized in oncology drugs. I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a very big, now I will be leaving nameless company for the last 15 years. And basically what I am is a process chemist. And so I take the molecules from discovery and actually figure out how to scale them up and make them on kilogram scale so that they can be delivered to patients.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jelly. My handles are Jellums on all things. I work in immunology. I basically work on diagnostic blood tests. I've done research and development for those tests, and now I do more product support and process improvements for blood tests and the machines that run them.
Well, hi, my name is Maria, and I go by Goblin K on Instagram. I've also been around since the LiveJournal days. I used to go by the name Shiba Hime. And I'm a front-end programmer, and I work at a tiny software as a service company in Sweden. So it means that the software that we develop is also the product that we sell. So yeah, everything you see in the UI, that is what I do, basically.
Cool. Hi, my name's Monique. I go by Nikki Momo on Instagram. My pronouns are she, her. I've been wearing Lolita for about 4-ish years, almost 5. I'm a Latina, a Mexican American, but I'm a product designer in the Bay Area, and I've been working in tech for over 10 years. So I help design new features and validate user flows and create prototypes as part of the product that eventually get developed and shipped live.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So next we're going to talk a little bit about what is STEM. So what is it?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Becky
Oh my
returns now,
goodness.
so
Sorry, I was having audio difficulties. I had to switch devices. I'm sorry.
Okay.
yeah, it's fine.
So introductions. I go by Becky Blue Jewel on Instagram. I am a moderator of the Atlanta Lolita community. I've been in Lolita officially since 2009, but I knew about it before that. But I'm a molecular biologist. I got my PhD in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at the University of South Carolina, and I am currently a biology professor.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what STEM is. So STEM is an acronym. It stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And some quick examples of STEM careers are wildlife biologist, a computer systems administrator, a psychologist, civil engineer, someone who works as an actuary, all the stuff that we do is STEM. There's so many, it's such a diverse set of fields and disciplines. So there's all kinds of stuff. One of the major issues in STEM is that femmes and women and femmes are often underrepresented and underpaid. So only 27% of the STEM workforce, despite being about half of the US workforce, is represented in STEM. And so of that number, only 5% are women of color, which is terrible. There's also a gender earnings gap across nearly all STEM occupations, with men earning more than women and femmes. Equal pay for equal work is a common struggle across the STEM fields. Men earn almost 15,000 more and 33,000 more than Latinx and BIPOC women, which is also terrible. My understanding is that it can vary based on the different fields that you're in, but there's not one STEM field that's like particularly good about any of this. Historically, most STEM careers have been stereotypical, like men's work or boys club style cultures, causing girls and women to lose interest in STEM subjects early in their education or to drop out of the workforce. Currently, there are initiatives to promote STEM as a viable and possible career opportunity for girls. All right, so the roundtable discussion. I've got some discussion topics for us. Let me pull those up. We can just kind of go through the group and talk about them. So the first question I have for us is, did you always know that you wanted to go into STEM or into the field that you ended up in? I'll let somebody else go ahead and answer that. I'm gonna pop open a drink real quick. There we go.
Well, I can go. My mother has me on videotape as a 6-year-old saying I'm a scientist when I grew up. So that's been.
I think for me, I wasn't really good at much else other than chemistry, so it was just kind of a natural fit. But I really didn't know until I was in high school, and I had a really, really great general chemistry professor, and he actually kind of pushed me to get more into it, and it just sort of worked out that way. I think when I was little, I wanted to be like a whale trainer at SeaWorld, not knowing how horrific SeaWorld was because I was a child. But it just kind of happened organically for me, I guess.
For me, I was not interested in going into the sciences at all. I wanted to be a graphic designer when I started college, and I kind of went through a couple major changes. I wanted to do psychology. I wanted to do pharmacy. I saw organic chemistry kicked my ass really hard, so I decided to go into genetics. And I don't do genetics now in my career. I work in human immunology, and that just kind of happened. I liked doing lab work actually when I was doing all the prereqs for my classes, but I actually wanted to do an art degree, but I got kind of pushed and pressured into doing something medical related because I come from a family of nurses.
I didn't know I wanted to do STEM. I was always kind of good at it in school, but super honesty hour time here. I ended up going into STEM and into computer science in particular because I wanted cash to buy Lolita. So, Lolita's why I'm in STEM.
Valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. So I actually want to be a comic artist or an animator when I was a kid. In high school, I learned about like graphic design, and then I started like building my own websites and blogs. In high school, when I started college, I got into the graphic design program there, and I took a lot of art courses. But it was during my internships in college where they needed like a website to be worked on. So I kind of leaned into that, and then I learned a little bit of like front end programming, like CSS and HTML. And so after college, like my first job was at a small local design agency, and we built, the websites for businesses around town and did their logo designs. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into like web design, product design, and tech.
Yeah, I actually did not at all start in tech. I was more of a creative soul in, I guess the equivalent of it in the United States is high school, like here in Sweden. But I was in studying media in high school. Wanted to work in the radio. So I started working as a journalist. I got a bachelor's degree in journalism. And then after working in the media industry for a few years, I got burned out. And the only other thing that I could come to think of that I was good at was HTML and CSS and stuff like that, which I was self-taught since I was 14. So I went to, I think the English word is vocational school. That was supposed to last 2 years, but before my first year had ended, I was actually drafted for a job as a front-end programmer. So it went pretty well, and now I've been in the tech industry for like 5 years, but been working with programmers in different settings as a journalist as well before that. So I've always been. It took me a while to get into the tech industry officially, but always been on the tech side, I feel like.
Nice.
And
Thank you,
also,
everybody.
I have to say, like it's very interesting because you say that it was like 5% women in the tech industry in the US or something like that. But
yeah, 5% of the 27%. So I think it was 27% of the workforce in STEM is Femme, and then of that percent, only 5% are women of color.
Yeah, so the statistics that we have in Sweden, just as a comparison, like the people that work in tech or IT, I don't know how much of it is actually like STEM, but within the IT business, there's like 10% women. But there are no statistics of if there are like what race people are, because we don't register that kind of statistics in Sweden. But needless to say, we are underrepresented. So yeah.
Interesting. Did any of you find that your family were supportive or maybe even pushy when you decided or announced or told them that you were going to go into a STEM field? I know for me, my family didn't really care as long as I was able to support myself. So I didn't really have a hard time telling my mom that I was going into computer science. She was like, okay, cool. And then I paid my way through school, and that was that, and that was fine.
I think for me, my parents wanted me to be a doctor, like most parents want their children to be doctors, I feel like. But I think that in the end, they were very supportive, as long as, my dad is from Italy, and he is now 91 years old, and he's just like, you're going to need somebody to take care of you, because he's very traditional. And I was always like, I'm going to take care of myself. Like, don't worry about it. So I think as long as I was able to like take care of myself, that was all that really mattered.
I can go. My parents were both high school teachers. My mother's an English teacher. My dad's a math teacher. So they're like, you want to get a PhD? Excellent, more education. Right. I remember growing up, my mom had gone back to get her master's while I was a child. So she said, go ahead and get your PhD now. Get it done, get it over with, do it. I wish I had done it. And so, yeah, having that support from educated parents that knew the education system and knew academia really helped me just, barrel on through and get it done.
For me, I touched on it earlier, how my family, they're all nurses, and my mom really wanted me to go into becoming a nurse or becoming a doctor too. But I wasn't that great in school either. But she still wanted me to have some kind of stability. That's why she kind of pressured me out of pursuing graphic design and going into something science related. So I kind of, made a compromise and went through a more STEM route and more into lab work. And I've kind of worked my way up into up the ladder a little bit. And now I have engineer in my title. So that has satisfied my mom a lot more now.
Yeah, my parents were. Oh,
no,
sorry.
It's fine.
My parents are really supportive. Even when it seemed like I was gonna be more of like an art major or more art heavy than tech. So my parents are the first of their families to attend college, but they weren't able to finish because of various reasons. So my mom even though she ended up her career in like business and finance, she wanted to make sure that no matter what I chose to do, that I had a college degree so that I wouldn't be held back in opportunities, just because I didn't have a piece of paper or face any glass ceilings, kind of like she did without one. It was a bigger struggle for her in her career. So yeah, my parents were really supportive of basically whatever I want to do, kind of the same way, as long as I could support myself and not have to rely on anyone.
I just have to say I like the comment from Toki Goes in the chat. I was simply born Indian. That's funny. But for my part, a long story short, it's that my parents died when I was pretty young. So I grew up with my aunt, my father's sister, and she is actually like some kind of middle boss lady at an IT company. So when I wanted to get into computers in high school, she said that, nah, you're not gonna make it because you hate math. So that shut me down pretty quick. But when I actually started, like when I said that as an adult that I wanted to get into programming, then she's always been supportive, and like it's more, I think we're gonna come into it like a little bit later, but she was more the one that was like, well, you can't dress like that if you're going into tech. And I'm like, yeah, watch me. So yeah, but my family's always been really supportive. So, and basically just if you're happy, then that's fine. Just pay your bills so that you don't get in trouble. So yeah.
Thank you, everybody. What are some common misconceptions that people have about the job that you do?
For me, I say that I work in like a biotech company, and people think, oh, you're working on some really innovative, groundbreaking stuff, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I'm not actually. We're kind of, it's not actually that interesting a lot of the times. It's a lot of red tape that we have to get through. It's a lot of actually, sometimes I call myself a professional emailer rather than working in science sometimes, because it feels like a lot of it is more being having some diplomacy and having to work with all these other people rather than working with my lab coat and with a pipette and actually doing sciencey things. It's more, there's a lot of soft skills involved.
I think for me, when I tell people that I'm a chemist, people are like, oh, do you use Bunsen burners? And I haven't used a Bunsen burner since high school. I wouldn't even know how to light one anymore, but like everybody has this like very stereotypical like TV view of what chemistry is, or like a lot of times they'll be like, oh, it must be just like CSI and like things like that, or like Breaking Bad is also a common one. People are like, oh, what kind of fun drugs do you make? And I'm like, fun if you have cancer and are dying, you know. I think that's just like, a lot of people also kind of think it's a lot more glamorous than it is. Like half the time I'm making a huge mess. I'm burning holes in my clothes with like chemicals and stuff. And it's just, so I definitely do not wear any Lolita to work, obviously, because things get ruined. But yeah, I think people just like don't really kind of know what it kind of looks like behind the scenes.
I'll echo that. In a molecular biology lab, there's a lot of, you know, stinky chemicals, tissue extraction, DNA extraction. It's very, you know, it's a lot of me in a lab coat and a pipette, really. You know, a whole bunch of machinery, pipettes, and pretty boring, and lots of pipette 8 microliters into 90 tubes, you know, and it's time consuming and can be very tedious. You know, the really exciting stuff is pretty rare, right? I mean, when you get a really exciting result, or when, you know, in the case of when I'm teaching labs, when a lab actually works, right? Because the students have been able to do it properly the first time. Those exciting things are actually pretty rare. One misconception that I run into a lot, this may just be specific to me, but I'll tell people I'm a molecular biologist, and then like a day later they're like, oh yeah, this is my niece, she's a microbiologist. I'm like, no, that's very different. Microbiologists study bacteria. I study DNA and RNA and proteins, specifically in tomato plants, so it's a little different.
I think with the kind of work that I do, there's like misconceptions from the outside, and then there's also misconceptions from the inside. So I think one of the outside misconceptions is that it's super glamorous and like you get all this free stuff, and it's just, you don't really do any work all day and you just take naps in the nap pods and whatever. But we like to call the nap rooms crying rooms. If that gives you any indication about what the work environment's like.
Hey, I cry in the bathroom, so you got a little bit better.
That's fair.
Well, resting room, nap room, whatever.
My catharsis
right?
is way glass test tubes into the broken glass and just hearing the glass shatter. That's what makes me feel better.
Ooh, that sounds really cathartic. I love it.
Cathartic. When an experiment goes bad and you got to throw everything away, you can just go, oh.
Oh, that's so good. And it's not necessarily a glamorous job. It's really, it's difficult work, and we don't get to enjoy a lot of the like the perks necessarily because we're working so hard. But then one of the unfortunate misconceptions that comes from the inside, especially at the type of company I work at, which is like a larger, like established industry company, if that makes sense, is that women are not biologically suited to write software. And there's this website called Team Blind, and I recommend that you do not go there. If there's other engineers in the chat, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's basically like 4chan, but for the tech industry. And it's really terrible. And so there's like legit a lot of opinions that like, this is not an uncommon opinion that like people born female are not biologically wired to write software. And so like there's legitimately coworkers who think that I have to work with. Like people have like refused to shake my hand and stuff, which is strange. So
why do people have to be so disgusting?
Oh, it's terrible. So, but that's the internal misconception. I guess there's misconceptions about the type of work. Like there's the like regular software engineer, and then there's the type of software engineering that I do. And I think that like because I'm an SRE, which is a site reliability engineer, and so we handle like production issues, so keeping everything online essentially and keeping it up to date. And I think the regular software engineers think that we don't do anything all day, but it's really tough work. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts.
Well, I guess I can't be a software engineer then, but I'm doing pretty good, I must say. But I can definitely agree on like internal misconception and external misconceptions. Like people that are not in the industry, when they want to know what I do. Sometimes I get from my friends, like when they've watched me work or something, they've been like, "Are you hacking into the mainframe now?" And I'm like, yes, dear, I am. Of course I
Especially
am.
if you've got like a terminal
Yes.
up, like green text on a black background.
Yes, exactly. It's like I do a deploy, and my girlfriend's like, "This is sexy." I'm like, no, babe, no, it's not. It's really not. I promise. But yeah. But the internal misconception, I mean, I work in a pretty back end heavy company. So I was actually one of the 2 front end programmers in my company. We're going to be 4 soon, thank God. But in the beginning, most of the tasks were back end heavy. So like database stuff, for the ones that don't know what back end is, and front end stuff is like, well, everything you can see basically on a website. And so almost every time we had like a planning stand-up meet, the backenders were like, "But what are you gonna do, Maria? Do you have anything to do?" And I'm like, "Yes, because of the state that this software is looking like shit. I have a lot to do actually." So not even my in the beginning, not even my back end colleagues understood what I did. So I've actually been having like lunch and learns about like, this is what I do in the front end, this is CSS, this is HTML. But the good thing is, on the other hand, that my coworkers are extremely like, I mean, extremely uncommonly understanding and respectful of like, okay, you can do something that I do not understand. Like, I do not understand CSS, so I respect you for that, and that's actually, it's a relief. But yeah, talking about I guess we'll delve more into that, the stereotypes of the industry. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for a product designer, some people think that it's either really easy or that it's just all visuals, like all the stuff that dictates what the front end looks like. Especially because most people have experience using a website or an app and they have opinions about on it, you know. So, but there's actually a lot of other facets and considerations that go on, like kind of behind the scenes, that have like big effects on the thing that you use every day, whether it be like a website or a phone app or what have you. So that's one of the other, I guess, misconceptions. I spend a lot of time just thinking and talking all day, like even, you know, with my colleagues about different situations on things that we should be researching, testing and validating before I even get to like building out, like say a wireframe or a simple prototype to test. And then the other big misconception too is that if you're going to be a product designer, web designer, that you have to code or have some, you know, you have to also be a front-end engineer too. You don't have to. I mean, obviously it helps. The more you know about anything helps. But as long as you have like a high level understanding of sort of the underlying languages that you're designing on top of, it'll make your life so much easier if you go in this field. So that way you're not, you know, you kind of know what's technically possible, what things are kind of worth like pushing towards the edge. And then when you have to kind of make those considerations as to like, well, what can we do in this amount of time with this amount of resources, you're able to present sort of those options. And I found that your engineering team will also appreciate that a lot.
Also, it helps if the company structure actually allows for the more communication that you can do during the work, because not all workplaces are like that, unfortunately. But I mean, the more communication that you can have with your product designer or engineer, it's the better, actually.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to facilitate conversation is key, and being able to have like strong communication skills is really important too, because you're working with a bunch of different people that are all, you know, sort of the experts in their like field or area. So you kind of need to be able to know what's inside their head to some extent, to be able to like all come together to build this like very complex thing in a lot of times.
Let's see. Was there a moment, or so was there a time that you started to look around the office or this classroom or wherever you work or had education, that you started to realize that maybe there were fewer people that looked like you or that were similar to you? Did anyone have a time like that?
I'll go first. And yes, because my group for about the last 5 years, up until I took a new position last year, I was the only woman in a group of 30 men, all of whom were white except for 3 Chinese men. So nobody looked like me. And I definitely was often treated like a secretary, like, oh, well, for this project team meetings, you take meeting minutes, which I feel like is a very secretarial thing. And normally that responsibility is shared, but it was always just like, oh, Joe, you take the minutes. And I think when it got the worst for me was we were hiring somebody for a new position, and it was at my level. And we brought a candidate in who was another man, and he was a good chemist and a good candidate. And, you know, I gave the thumbs up, not that anybody listened to my opinion, but I was like, yeah, we should hire him. He seems solid. And he declined to take the position unless they offered him a better title, which is within your right. But he had less experience and education than me, and they did that. They gave him the higher title. And so it became this thing where I had to basically threaten legal action, because you can't just give somebody more money and a bit better title when, you know, he's less experienced and educated than the only woman you have in your department. So a week later, I got called in with like my director and my manager, and they were just like, congratulations, we're promoting you. And I was just like, thanks. Like, it's well-deserved. And I know that, but I can't enjoy it now because, you know, I basically had to force this on you guys. And that's not an uncommon story throughout any STEM field, I'm sure. And they always tell us, you know, don't discuss your salaries because they don't want you to know what people are getting paid.
Which is bullshit, by the way. Please do discuss your salaries.
Oh, please do. But about a year ago, right as the pandemic started, I switched departments into an earlier stage chemistry group, and they had actually done a good job of recruiting women. And so now I'm in a group that has 3 other women in it, which is pretty amazing for chemistry, actually.
3 other women, and how many other colleagues?
There are 6 men in this group. So. But as I was moving from my old department, which was in Boston, back to Los Angeles to join this new group, my director in that group, he was just like, how can you leave when we just hired another woman? You're going to leave her all by herself. And I was like, that's your problem, not mine.
Yeah. Like, do you want a medal for actually hiring another woman? You're not getting one.
Yeah. And when she interviewed, I was actually away at HelloCon, and, you know, they set up this interview series for her. And for my company, when you do an interview, it is a full 8-hour day. You give a presentation. Every 30 minutes, 2 new people come and talk to you. And they set up her entire day with just men. And I have heard the story now. She kept asking, oh, do you guys, like, are there any women that work in this group? And they replied with, oh, we have one, but she's on vacation right now. And it's just like, oh, man. So when I got back, they had to fly her back out, and we had lunch together. And, you know, none of those men were like, oh, we don't understand. Like, why would it be so bad for her to just spend a whole day with us? And I'm just like, as a woman, you don't want to spend a day with like 8 hours of men. There are other women that work in this company and work in like different departments she could have met with. And they're like, oh, well, I guess we just didn't think about that. And I was like, well, that's kind of the problem.
I'm smirking because I see Jessica posting in the comments, "Sir, where are the women?" And I had this I had this dream a few months ago that I shared in our Discord server, where with my partner and I and our lizard, we went to Mexico on vacation, and we were going back to the hotel, and there was like a business boy conference happening at the hotel, and we happened to be entering the hotel through a door that they were exiting, and I just decided to be really spicy and go, "Sir, where are the women?" and start just like pulling random men aside because there's no women in this conference. And so I see Jessica referencing the dream I told her about a few months ago.
Oh,
That's funny.
yeah, it's funny because it's true.
In my experience in biology, now of course individuals' mileage may vary, but I feel like in biology we are a little bit more well represented. Certainly the older generations do skew more heavily male, right? Like my professor for my PhD was male. Everyone older than him was male, but anyone that was his age or younger, I'd say like, early Gen Z or younger, you began to see a little bit more representation. And in academia, at least in professorship and particularly in teaching professorships, I do feel like it is fairly well represented. But at the same time, when I look at, say, physics or chemistry, it doesn't seem to follow, right? But there's something about biology that does seem to be a little bit more equally yoked, I should say. I guess I could say. But again, another individual's experience might be different from mine, but that's what I see.
I would say at my company that the biology groups are mostly, it's at least 50%, if not skewing higher women. And so like overall, this company looks good because there are a lot of women in high positions and executive roles, and the groups have a lot of women in them. It's just a chemistry problem for the most part.
Right. Now, I will say now the kinds of women, back to the question of, do you not, or are these people not representative of you? I'm sure Lolitas have this experience. You're a Lolita in your heart before you even know what Lolita is. And then when you find it, you're like, oh, that's what I've been missing. So even when I started my PhD, I was before I discovered Lolita, but I was the kind of person, I wore a full face of makeup every day. I wore, nicely coordinated outfits with jewelry. And that was very, I was pretty much the only person I would see in my department that wore makeup or jewelry or, anything beyond just lab clothes.
I wanted to echo Becky's point that in biology, I am seeing more women too, especially in higher positions. But what I've noticed, at least in my particular industry in immunology, which, it's like a subset of biology, it's not a lot of women of color in those higher positions. It's more white women, more older white women in those positions. So it's a little bit harder to see women of color in less on the on the lower end of the ladder, or like less managers, less executives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in tech, like going to school. Granted, I was an art major. There was like some Latino students, but I think that's just the effect of going to an in-state school in Arizona. But in the Bay Area, once I moved out here, in the jobs that I have, there have not been very many Latino engineers, male or female, and most of my teams have been mostly made up of men. It's gone a little better over the years. I think as different companies I worked at have made more of an effort to be more equitable, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Like I haven't worked with any other Latino product designers, but I have worked with some like engineers. Most of them were remote though. In the past, but thanks to groups like in the Bay Area specifically, like Techeria and Latinos and Latinx in tech, they kind of help provide that network. So that's also an option if you're interested in that.
Yeah, in Sweden, there are, in the tech industry, it's predominantly white, unfortunately. And I think it also has a lot to do with like, I think it is similar like everywhere in most of the Western world, but like computers and coding and programming is kind of, how do you say, like it's not strange for white cis men to get into some kind of computer related work field, because even though like home computers were kind of common in the mid 90s, late 90s, it actually was not really a possibility for working class or lower middle class people to get a computer in their home and therefore not start programming. So it's been a question of class. So the tech industry is predominantly white, male, and also like a lot of the senior developers are white male, 35 plus years old, maybe even 40, 45 plus. And now the latest 5 years, I would say, then there has been an increase in femmes that go into STEM or tech, and also into the tech education. And it's skewing like, unfortunately, it skews that most femmes in tech in Sweden go into front end or UX design, and not so many go into back end programming. But I remember that when I went to vocational school, it was actually more like 50-50 for women and men. So that was good. But from what I have seen from my former classmates, none of them, the females, work in tech as a programmer now, unfortunately. I think from the ones that I've talked to, some of them just felt like it wasn't for them. And when I talked to them a little bit deeper, it turned out that when they actually did get a job, they didn't get the same job tasks as their male counterparts, which I think that some in the STEM field can relate to, has happened, like you said, Joe, like more secretarial stuff. So I think that many of the females that I went to vocational school with actually thought that, well, maybe this wasn't the career for me because they just didn't get the same tasks as all the other programmers or engineers. So that is unfortunate, actually. So I have actually, I still am, for all the places that I've worked at, like I worked at 5 different places, and I've always been the only female and person of color on my teams. And I worked on teams in sizes of 10 to 50 engineers. I have had at max 2 other female co-workers, and the rest of them are male, and white. So yeah, sad.
That's so frustrating. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it is. But on the other hand, like there are also, I think it's hard to like describe because I'm not sure how the American culture is, but in Sweden, they are very, very keen on actually like diversifying. Like they really, really try hard to diversify. So basically, I've had a very easy time getting a job, like super easy time. Like I just like attach a photo of myself because I have a very Swedish sounding name, like typically Swedish sounding name. But when I attach a photo of myself and they see that I'm not white, then I have always gotten an interview. I have always gotten like a job offer. So that is the good part, but it's also very sad to be like the only one.
So worry that it's because of that you're getting, like, not that you aren't qualified, but do you, like, I know for me and women we hire in, a lot of them are like, did I just get hired because I'm a woman now? Or is it because they actually thought I was good for the job? Because so many companies are like trying to meet these diversity criteria now.
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends, because when I've gone to interviews, I've always asked, like, what are your policies for diversity, or for diversity on this company, and depending on their answers. Like, I've been to interviews where they're like, oh, we have women. Yeah, okay, but how many of them are engineers and not only receptionists? Like, the receptionist is very important too for the company, but like, how many of them are engineers? And then some companies couldn't even answer that. And then they would offer me a job and I would be like, no, sorry, I would never accept, because that would mean that they're not actually, like, they are desperate in a way that it's not a complimenting way. But I've been to interviews with a company that when I asked about, like, how are your diversity policies and stuff like that, how do you work with it, and they instantly said, we are shit. We try, we really want to do good, we do our damnedest, but honestly we're shit. And then it's like, okay, good, great, then I know that you're not bullshitting me, at least. So then I've actually considered, like, job offerings like that from those companies. But for the company that I work for now, there was a person, like an Asian man, at the interview, and there were females on the tech team, but the one developer, she actually quit her job last month, unfortunately. But if it hadn't been for that Asian man who was a developer in the interview, and if it hadn't been for the other female developer in that team, and the good answers for the diversity policy questions and stuff like that, then I wouldn't have taken the job at this company that I am right now. But yeah, I think it all depends. But like, at least if they actually are aware that they want to be better, then that's fine, I guess. But yeah, it's so apparent when they are actually just fishing desperately.
I can say too, like, for the company the company that I work at, like I said, they've done better, but there's still a long way to go. And I mean, I've spoken up and asked, like, our people team, basically, like, what can we do to make sure that we're posting, like, new job postings in different areas, so that way we can get more diverse candidates applying, and making sure that that these opportunities are available, and being aware of them. And also, I don't know sort of what their screening process is, but just even asking about, like, for initial, like, resume submissions or whatever, is there a way to kind of do it blindly, so that way whoever's looking at them isn't, like, biased or swayed just by the name, whether it sounds more masculine or feminine, or like a person of color's names. Because I'm aware of, like, studies too that show that once you do that, then the candidates that are the best qualified tend to be more diverse and mixed. Shocking.
Yeah.
So I mean, everyone, we should also be pressing, like, our, the people team, whoever's doing the hiring and recruiting, or managers that are doing interviews, like, what are you doing to help against, like, bias and sourcing out, different places to put job postings?
Yeah, definitely. And also, like, I've been nagging my recruitment team that at the company that I work for, that, like, you can't, if you put your ads in channels and only get, like, one kind of candidate, then basically you're not really making yourself visible for the people that you really want to hire. You'll just hire another person, another another copy of the person that you hired before. So yeah, it's really important.
This question isn't on the list, but I'm curious just to get thoughts about. So I know at my company, there's a lot of efforts to demonstrate lack of bias through like these transparent processes and having like criteria for promotions and for being hired and stuff like that, and like having very rigorous standards around that. But in my experience, what that's often done is led to something that my union rep called bias laundering, which I thought was this brilliant description of sort of like injecting their biases into a process essentially, and making it difficult for people that aren't, you know, cis white men to get promoted or to get hired into the company. I'm curious if anyone's experienced something like that, or the opposite with their companies or with previous employers, and attempts to be more transparent or lose. Yeah.
I mean, I think for us, it's not transparent at all on how promotions are given out. And that is frustrating for everybody across the board. They always say like, oh, you have to meet like certain criteria, but the like line is always moving. And so, you know, I went at one point 10 years without a promotion, but then have gotten like 2 in a period of 4 years. And it just like nothing really kind of makes sense. I think it's really cool though that you have a union rep and a union, because that's not something that really exists in pharma. And it would be awesome to actually have that.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have that, because I've told her things about just like, oh, I heard this about my position or about like my future at the company. You know, my skip level manager, so like my manager's manager said this, and she's like, wait a second, like that's kind of fucked up. And I'm like, is it? I didn't think about it. She goes, well, think about it this way. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. So like, it's really nice having someone to bounce things off of who just like understands. One, she's like a woman who does the same job as me, which is really great. So we've worked together previously, but like it's nice having someone to back me up, and B, someone to bounce ideas off of.
Is your union rep like company specific, or is that just like your job kind of? Do they represent people at multiple companies?
She's just at our company, because we have like a company specific chapter of the like national union, and so my understanding is that it's a little unconventional for like traditional trade workers unions, because thank God they're considering us trade workers, because I think that software engineers are just blue collar labor. To be completely honest, we're just skilled laborers, and there's nothing fancy about being a software engineer. We're just skilled labor. Like you have to have skill to do it, but like we're no different than like electricians or plumbers when it comes down to it, in my opinion. But yeah, so she just represents people at the company, and I think specifically in our division.
Yeah, it's unique. Like in tech, it's still like the topic of a union or unionizing is still pretty controversial, I think, across the board. It's kind of the same thing, like don't share your salaries, and people feel very mixed about that one. Yeah, obviously they probably shouldn't.
In Sweden, actually, the union is pretty strong. It's like I think actually it's more common to actually have like a union rep at the company that you work for than not. Like, so if you don't have a union rep at the company, then people are like, do I really want to work there? So, but also like there is like a unionized what's it called? Like a unionized contract that ensures that everyone in the company gets like equal pay, a minimum amount of raise of your salary each year, like you have workers' rights and stuff like that. That is ensured, and you don't, as a company, you don't have to sign this unionized contract for your workplace, but some companies, like some some companies in Sweden that you work with as a tech company, they choose companies to work with depending on if they have this unionized contract or not. So in order for my company to get more business, like be sure to get more business clients, they actually sign this unionized contract. So that's good for us. But one common misconception is that you don't, if you have a unionized workplace as a programmer, that you don't get as much of a salary raise as you could get if you work in a non-unionized contracted place. But it's just not true. You get a lot of money. Don't worry. Always get a lot of money. So
I think that cultural perspective is really interesting, because I remember I had to go to Switzerland for a work trip last year, and I was talking to some people in the Swiss Lolita community, and we were just kind of like joking, and I was like, if I ever get fired, it's going to be for labor agitation, or you're like trying to like organize labor, and they're like, you don't have a union? Because we didn't at this point, because we organized somewhat recently, and they were like, wait a second, like, you're in our country, like, you have, like, your coworkers are here, and like, you're working here, like, how does that work? I was like, it sucks. It sucked.
Yeah. So I guess that's just it's a very different thing. But yeah, in Sweden, it's like if a company does not have a union rep, it's a weird company. Like, don't work there.
That's so fascinating. Wow. Let me see. I have more questions. Let me see. I scrolled down, and now I got to find my place.
I saw a comment in the chat where Pastel Pastry Chef was saying that they were passed on for something because they were a liability because they one day might start a family and need time off.
Oh, Lord.
And I have to say that that is a really big thing at my work, because, a lot of times we're working with carcinogenic chemicals. And for me, who I was married, I'm no longer married anymore. But when I got engaged, like, the first thing that was asked of me, and people not knowing my status, that I'm unable to have children, they were like, "Oh, you're getting married? Do you think you'll start a family? Are you gonna want to be out of the lab?" And I was just like, "No, that's not for me." But like, for other women, there is a lot of stress about that, because nobody wants to be, when you get into the later stages of your pregnancy, even though you're doing everything you can to protect yourself, there is obviously some risk when you're working with some chemicals. And, a lot of women are afraid that they're going to get passed up for promotions or lose their job because of it. There's a couple of girls that I work with now who are trying to organize to get our insurance to cover freezing eggs so they can like have children at a later date. Because I think there are a couple of pharmaceutical companies out there that do that, but we don't. And it's just interesting to watch that kind of struggle go down. But I think that is a kind of a common thing, at least in chemistry, where people are worried about having children and what that's going to mean for their career.
That is interesting.
That's fascinating.
Because, it's so interesting. The freezing of eggs has not even been like a topic here in Sweden at all. But we have pretty strict laws, like discrimination laws, that you cannot discriminate if you go to an interview and you are like 8 months pregnant, and if you don't get the job and you think it is because you are pregnant, then you can actually sue and always win against the company for discrimination. Like, there are super strict laws for parental leave and to protect women, at least in or like people that want to have children, regardless of gender, in tech. But in like service jobs like a restaurant or stuff like that, the law is there, but no one dares to sue, because it's just not worth it, unfortunately. But when it comes to tech, they're like super strict discrimination, like they follow the discrimination laws pretty strictly. And even like the most tech companies in Sweden have like IVF as a part of the health insurance. Like, so if you want to do IVF or something like that, I think that's the right name in English too.
Yes.
Then you can get it. You can get it as a part of the health insurance, like contact with a doctor and like I don't think like you don't get it paid, but at least it's cheaper. It gets cheaper anyway. And also like you always get parental leave, like at least 3 months, I think, and that's by law. And then companies can throw in tech companies almost always throw in extra months parental leave, like paid parental leave.
That's so nice. That's amazing.
Come to Sweden. No.
It's funny because I have coworkers. We have locations all over the globe, but we have East Coast and West Coast locations. And so each location follows their state rules or like whatever is most beneficial. And so California, I think, has more on the law, gives more parental leave than, say, Massachusetts, where I used to work. And so our Boston site would give less leave because they're just like, we're following state law. We can do this. Whereas like if you were to have a child in California, you would get more parental leave. And so it gets really weird with state laws, and they definitely will use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm actually on disability leave right now from work because of like the stress that I was under at my job. And they definitely like fight you on like letting you actually take that leave. Like they find every technicality that they can, and like, oh, it's so stressful trying to get what's part of your compensation package. And so like, I can only imagine like having a kid and trying to bond with your baby or take that time off to recover, like whether you're the parent that had the kid or not. But like, that sounds so stressful.
Yeah, it's a legit fear for me. Like, I consider my future. I mean, and it's up to the discretion of the companies too. Some companies are nice and will also offer, I think, like leave for the fathers, but then it's only like a few weeks, if that, and then you're free to take unpaid time off and still work there, but that's pretty shitty too. So it's like, great, and that's not even getting into other considerations like, you know, daycare and commuting and all of that. Like,
well, that's
Sweden
interesting too, because sorry, go on.
Yeah, Sweden does not differentiate between, like, parental leave is parental leave, no matter what gender. Also paid, always paid.
When one of the reasons I chose professorship in academia is the free time and the, you know, more of the flexibility that I would have. And I ended up, my pregnancy ended up being, I was due right at the end of the spring semester. And so I just didn't teach any summer classes that summer and stayed home all summer, because we're 9-month employees, right? We teach fall and spring semester. And then summer is optional. And if you teach summer, it's extra, but you don't have to, right? So I didn't have to take any maternity leave at all. And my boss was like, thank you for not making me do paperwork. But, you know, it worked out. It worked out. And, you know, when I went back the following fall, and my son was just a few months old at that point, it was, you know, being a professor and having a private office, I was able to pump and, you know, all of those things that I needed to do for him while I was away. But it certainly would not have been as doable if I had not had that nice private office.
That's so interesting. I think another interesting component to that is that careers often leave you isolated. Like, a lot of people move away from their families. Like, I don't live anywhere near my family now, and like, I don't plan on having children, but like, I'm imagining if someone in my situation were, or any of our situations, you know, if you're away from your family and your work isn't cooperating or not giving you enough leave or support, like that's so difficult. Because I know when I was born, my mom leaned very heavily on my grandma. So
that is actually a trend that has started now in Sweden, that even if you, like, I live in Stockholm, so it's the capital city, but it takes a lot of time. Like if you live in one side of the town and then you get to work on the other side of town, and then you need to pick the kids up and stuff like that. I don't have kids. I have 4 kids, but still. So a trend actually in the tech industry in Sweden is that people move to like smaller towns for the shorter distances, and also to get closer to families, for just to get like the puzzle of life to just come together. And the smaller towns and smaller regions are actually like having national campaigns for tech people to like, please come to us and work. Like with like we'll set you up with daycare, we'll set you up with job interviews for your spouse if you have one, etc., etc. Just come and work. Like, so that's actually insane. Like I haven't seen that for any other kind of industry at all.
yeah, I know where I live in Vermont, they were offering a $10,000 incentive, which unfortunately we didn't qualify for because it was after the like incentive ended, for people to move to Vermont and work remotely there. And the internet here, in some places it's horrible, but where we're at, it's great. Like I actually have better internet here than I did back in the Bay. So when I was working with my team doing very sensitive operations, I was always the one to be handling them because my internet's way more stable out here in the literal middle of nowhere than it was for people like in San Jose, like Silicon Valley proper. But yeah, it's super interesting that places are seeing that opportunity to say, hey, like if you can work remote, come on out here. But I know that's not the case for a lot of STEM jobs because you need to be in the lab or you need to be on site for whatever reason, and that's really tough too. I have another question. What is the best part about being a femme in STEM? Just change your tone.
Job opportunities. No, I'm just kidding.
Yay.
Job offers everywhere. No, no, but seriously. It's like, since there is a lack of programmers, at least here, and also a lack of females or femmes, and even more a lack of persons of color, then yeah, I have job like what are they called? Like tech recruiter hunters calling me, emailing me like every day. No joke. So I mean, all offers aren't good, but I will never be without a job. So
that's awesome. Hell yeah.
I think for me, one of the most rewarding things of being a professor is that I can show the next generation of students that I'm a scientist, right? I may not be the stereotypical scientist, but I am a scientist, and you can be too. And I teach at an access institution where most of our student body is either immigrant, foreign, people of color, right? It's a majority minority demographic and I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud to teach there and to be able to show those students that they can do it too, that there is a path for them in STEM as well.
I think for me is actually, so I do a lot of community outreach, or did pre-COVID, where we would go into high schools and like talk on career day and stuff. And I was first like selected like 10 years ago by a director to do this. And I felt sort of funny because I mean, like, outside of Lolita, I'm like head to toe covered in tattoos. Sometimes I'll have colored hair. And he was just like, I think it's really important for like young kids to see that scientists aren't nerds. And I thought that was a little bit corny at first, but then I was like, you know what, that's true. And like getting out there and going to show people that like, hey, there are women and people who are a little more alternative that can do this is really nice. I would say the best part in my old department, when I was in the department of 30 men, was just pissing them off that they had to work with a woman every day was kind of like the best part, because they didn't really like it. But yeah, the more noble cause of like showing people that there's no specific way you have to look or be to be a scientist is probably the best part.
Yeah, for me, it's a petty reason. I'm small framed. I look, very cute, like young. But when I talk to people and then they suddenly realize, oh, she kind of has an assertive voice. Maybe I should actually take her more seriously. And being able to surprise those people is kind of like, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel a little more empowered. And, I also like to show a little bit of like my kawaii-ness with using like cute sticky notes and things. And, having those people not take me seriously, but then they suddenly see that I'm actually a capable human being too, and kind of getting that satisfaction feels good. But, the other more noble reason is I also do some outreach with my company for high school students and like participating in science fairs and stuff. And I like to be able to be a face there and show those kids like, hey, you can also work in STEM, and you don't have to look like the typical nerdy science person too. You can still be cute and express yourself. And I like showing the younger generations, the young'uns, that too.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's like what is the like a pro of English. What is it? One of the good things about being alternative in the as a programmer is that, well, it's actually a job where you can dress pretty much how you want, and people will still like take you seriously. At least in Sweden, because programming is still like, for the people who are not programming, it's like it's magic, hacking in the mainframe. So I mean, there are engineers, like the place that I work in now, I've always been a little bit scared to go full out Lolita on the first day of my job places, but on my first day at this company that I work on now, one of my coworkers, another programmer, he is a black metal guy. So he had like these, rivet arm covers, like covered his whole underarm.
Oh, cool.
He had band patches, and like he had like 2 long braids. And I was like, okay, I can go full out Lolita here, no problem. So that was great, actually. But yeah, I mean, I've worked at like super serious consultant firms that only work with bank programming and stuff like that. I gone into full Lolita in the office, and like they do a double take, but then they realize I'm a programmer, and then it's like, okay, she's a programmer. It's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I find it really exciting to be a part of like technology and working on stuff that changes how people use the internet in a sense. I'm also really passionate about like accessibility and coding for that or designing for that, and like teaching my colleagues about it as well, and helping them become more empathetic towards that, and realizing it's, an important part of, our day to day and what we do and what we put out there into the world. So I really like that, and just showing, that there's other people out there, other ways of thinking and doing things. I think by being, a Latina that's not, in a field where there's not a whole lot of us, dressing the way that I do. I guess I'm fortunate enough and work at a company that like I can wear kind of some Lolita-ish outfits, a bit more toned down to work, and just kind of be myself and be accepted, and just kind of show them a different perspective. That's one of the things. And then yeah, just I find understanding people and how they use things, and then kind of sharing that outward so other people can start to understand like one another better. Really exciting, and just helping to design things that, you know, save people time, that are, you know, just more pleasant to use overall.
That's awesome. I think for me, I don't know that I've reached a place where I can find perks yet. I think I've had a really rough go of things in my career. I've been in the industry for about 5 years, counting like that's including, or like that's since I graduated with my first bachelor's. So doing like jobs after that, and then internships during my second bachelor's, and then my current job now. I've had a pretty rough go of things, and I'm not sure that I've found any perks yet. Like it's hard. It's really tough. Like there's a lot of days where I'm like, is the money worth it? Like, is it worth my sanity? Is it worth like my very literal sanity? Is it worth that? But I think it is still rewarding work. And it's nice when you work hard that you see the results of that. And I think that's been something I've been able to do at my current company. But a fun story is that at my last job, there was a critical mass of women on the team. And so we had 2 front-end engineers and 4 or 5 back-end engineers, and all the back-end engineers were women, and the 2 front-end engineers were guys. And so that was a fun dynamic, because usually it's the other way around. But we would like swap makeup samples and like go shopping on our lunch breaks, because we were in like we were near Union Square, so we'd like go to Sephora, and like it was so fun. So I miss that. Okay, we got about 15 minutes left, or I guess a little less, because it's 17 after the hour. So I'm going to jump us into some of the J-fashion and STEM questions. Or we can jump into Q&A. It doesn't matter to me. Do we have a preference? All right, we can jump into the J-fashion questions, and then if people want to ask questions as we're going, then we can answer those as we see them, if that makes sense. Can you wear J-fashion to work on occasion?
Yes.
Yeah.
A petticoat won't fit under my lab coat, so if I do lab stuff, I can't wear full Lolita. But I have gone in full Lolita.
I don't wear a petticoat when I'm at the office, because I mostly just sit down all the time, so it's a waste of poof. But yeah.
It's a little hard for me. I do not want to wear my very precious Lolita to lab for obvious reasons. If I just have lecture or meetings or something like that, I can do J-fashion light. One of my favorite things, I have the Belladonna Ode to Darwin skirt, and I'll wear that to faculty meetings, and everyone oohs and ahs over it. Yeah. But I on a day-to-day basis, I wear what I call my professor costume, which is normie clothes.
Yeah, it's impossible for me to wear it just because of the nature of the things I work with. Even if, I mean, I probably could if I had a day where there was no lab work to be done, but I honestly don't know at this point in my life if I would put in the effort for that, I guess. But normally on a day-to-day basis, it's jeans, and a t-shirt for me. And I think that's part of the reason that like Lolita is such a fun, special kind of thing, is because I don't get to wear it very often.
Yeah, I'll wear like depending on my mood. I used to go into the office every day. A lot of like Emily Temple Cute and a cardigan, or Listen Flavor. So it's kind of either like all black, or maybe a dress with like a fun print and a low poof petty. And then if I had to like present something, sometimes in a larger meeting, or depending on like if it's like to see staff or something, I might wear something like that's a bit more, I guess, neutral. So, but still fun, maybe like a cardigan with like a Peter Pan collar over top, a beret, and pants, like denim or something. It just, totally depends on my mood that day and kind of what I'm doing.
I have worn J-fashion to work at my last job because it was a lot more of like a creative atmosphere. I would wear it fairly regularly. It was a little difficult on public transportation because I used to have to take the BART in San Francisco from my house to the office. And then when I started at my current job, we've got like our own transportation which is nice and it's easier for Lolita, but like it's such a casual environment that I feel like I stick out too much, and so I'd only wear it on like special occasions. Like one day when I got back from Switzerland, I don't remember what trip it was, one of them, I woke up at like 3 a.m. because I had jet lag, and I was like, I'm just gonna dress up, fuck it. And so I ended up coming to work in like a full cornet, and it was super fun. And all my coworkers were like, ooh, but like I felt like I stuck out too much, so I didn't like continue that. But it was fun the times I attempted it.
The few times that I actually have like super serious client meetings, I do have like what I call a LARP outfit for being a normie, LARPing a normie, but it's very, very rare.
Another question, is your job able to support your J-fashion shopping needs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes. I should not.
You define as need, right?
Yeah, it's desire. Your heart's desires.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't start actually wearing Lolita until I got like a real job, because now I had the money to spend. But I was like a long time admirer for like, since the LiveJournal days, and I finally started wearing it like maybe 6 years ago because my job I could finally afford it.
Yeah, I had a funny story. So I didn't start wearing Lolita till I turned 30. But kind of like what Becky said, I always wore like, excuse me, makeup or like cute bows or, kind of poofy skirts. And my coworkers from other offices across the world, when they would visit, they're like, oh, I thought you were a Lolita because the way you kind of dress. I was like, oh, no, I'm kind of familiar, but I don't really know yet. And my office at my previous company was right near the Angelic Pretty store in San Francisco. So I would walk by and like peek in the window and like think, oh no, it looks cute, but probably not for me. And then one day I finally just bit the bullet and went inside. It was for one of the
you never went back.
Basically, it was for one of the melty ribbon chocolate series. So that's kind of how I fell in love with it. And then, yeah, slowly over time, I started, buying more and then kind of wearing low-key stuff to the office, and yeah, just kind of embraced it. And so, yes, I'm very fortunate enough that my job does allow me to buy J-fashion very comfortably.
That is so sweet. I love that.
But now I work from home and I'm usually in sweatpants and like my hair in a ponytail. So now I just kind of wear it as going outside and doing grocery shopping now.
Has anyone been able to transfer or use any of their STEM skills into like J-fashion or Lolita like activities or anything like that? Like, for example, I'm pretty comfortable with spreadsheets, so I made this like fancy wardrobe spreadsheet that picks out various analyses and makes graphs and stuff like that. Has anyone else tried anything like that?
Doesn't really apply for me per se, but I'm wondering if you guys are like programming bots to like get the AP releases first.
No,
yes, that's the main hacking frame we're gonna get into. No, I actually want to. Like, my friends have asked me, since Great Britain has left the European Union and now has different import taxes than usual, than before. My friends that are Lolitas have asked me if I can hack Lace Market so that when they search for stuff in Europe, that they exclude the British stuff. But I think that's unfair, so I said no. But
there's always been rumors like, oh, somebody's just like programming a bot or like, flooding the server to get like the Closet Child or like AP releases first. So I was mostly kidding, but had to ask.
Yeah, I'm not that competitive of a shopper. I mostly like impulse buy secondhand things. So haven't had to do that. Well, not that I would ever do that. I don't think I would do that.
Yeah, just really fast.
It's less related to STEM and more related to being a professor and a mom, but just like being able to be like, okay, Lolitas, we're going to go here and we're going to do this, and being able to organize and say, this is what we're going to do at this meetup. And if you're, those skills help.
Yeah, it helps a lot with like planning meetups when those were a thing in the past. Having like some project management skills has helped me to really become like the logistics person for our meetups before.
Project management skills are always useful for everything.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I've wanted to like, maybe code up and design a nice like blog for myself to like, post about Lolita stuff and history because I'm into that. But like at the end of the day, I'm honestly like too tired and don't want to do any more like computer designery stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So I find myself
the
doing more
same.
like tactile projects on my off time. Like I got into needle felting. Or just like making little accessories for myself sometimes for a specific cord if I have an idea planned. I find that's kind of like relaxing or like a stress reliever at the end of the day. Yeah, I don't know, maybe someday in the future, like, yeah, I could maybe build a nice looking Lolita blog, but TBD
Yeah,
on that.
I mean, I've had the same Blogspot blog since way back. So, and I mean, I just like, I'll change the header image and the colors, and that's it. I'm not gonna do my day job on my spare time. So it's the same. I can totally get that. But
Yeah.
I actually managed to like get a hold of like the Shanyu app and install it on my phone. And Shanyu is like the Chinese equivalent of like secondhand Mercari and stuff like that. That was a challenge indeed, but yeah, I managed to get that down. That was probably my latest tech-related achievement for
Nice.
J-fashion. Yeah.
We have a bit of some overflow time if we decide to go into that to use that for Q&A. We have until 45 after the hour to really wrap things up. So we can go into Q&A now if we would like. And yeah, so chat, feel free to ask us questions and we can go ahead and answer those.
But I mean, if speaking about tech stuff and programming stuff and the J-fashion community, there are a lot of like, I think that like Lolibrary is like open source and anyone that is into programming can just join. So, I mean, there are opportunities, absolutely. Just that I'm just so tired. So tired.
Yeah, if you want to contribute to Lolibrary, I recommend, doing that just because they're usually pretty short-staffed. I think it's written in Golang, if I remember correctly. So if you're interested in contributing to an open source project, like that's a good one.
Yeah, so there are opportunities. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll use my design skills to make EGL memes sometimes.
Your memes are so good.
That is top tier content.
So there's always
the
a
things
chance.
we need.
Oh, I see. The Barry K account says, I saw questions earlier about how you deal with being femme and dealing with comments on your personal appearance. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I've had mostly like positive experiences, I guess. I mean, as far as I know, right? My coworkers just kind of think I'm a little eccentric or like very interesting. I had like a big Airtable, and like once we all started using Airtable at work, I was like, oh, this would be great for cataloging like my wardrobe. So I started doing that, and also pushing like, hey, coworkers, we should really use Airtable for this other stuff too. Yeah, I think most find it kind of neat or interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever said anything disparaging that I'm not aware of, but most people seem to enjoy it.
I think for me, I've, I try to dress like kind of cutesy or when I'm not like in full Lolita, and that kind of surprises my older coworkers. They're a little bit like, oh, you're wearing a thing. But for me, it's like, I don't care. I still like to just express myself. Like my my cubicle. I think it's still there. It has like all my kawaii like purikura on there, and when like everyone else is like so afraid to show their personality, like everyone else's desks are just really bare, just have pictures of their kids, and like I like to use, I like to use cute stationery, and I just like to express myself. And I think a lot of people at work appreciate that. I kind of am showing that I have a life outside of work. And I'm also a really big weeb, so I'll have like, I like to talk about how I went to an anime convention, and people will be like, "Oh, you are actually doing things outside of work. You actually have fun." Like, yeah, I do.
I love that.
Don't you?
My coworkers are very similar with the kind of like bare desk, and so we have these big whiteboards on the fronts of our desks. And I drew, for those familiar with the Poorly Drawn Cats Twitter account, it's these very like simplistic line drawings of like just cats in weird positions. And so I drew one of those on my big whiteboard, and my manager's just like, oh God, like he deals with me, like he like we have a good relationship, and he's just like, that's bread, there she is. It's just this really bizarre drawing on my big whiteboard.
Well, this one isn't necessarily so much comments on appearance, but I do find that, and I've compared notes with other faculty, and we find that students tend to refer to the female professors as Ms. or Mrs. and assume doctor for their male professors, whether they're a doctor or not. And it comes up enough that I notice it almost every semester. And again, comparing notes with other faculty, that they'll assume that a male professor is doctor, but they'll assume that a female professor is not. Not always, but I usually have to correct and say, I am Dr. Higgins, not just Mrs. Higgins. So.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh. I see a question from Hinties here that says, if you are in the position of change, what would you like to change about the current obstacles about being in STEM? Or are there any efforts being done at the moment? I think for computer science and for software stuff, there's a lot of like trying to get kids into it, which I have a lot of mixed feelings about, because on one hand, I feel like it can be a funnel into a toxic and abusive industry. And I don't necessarily feel good about mentoring people to get into software engineering, because I don't want them to have the experiences that I had. But on the other hand, I also understand that it can lift people out of poverty, which is what it did for me. Like I grew up very poor, and now I'm not, and I'm very, very fortunate. So it's a mixed bag for me with computer science, at least.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily in a position that I can have a lot of change, but I think just like being one more voice, like pushing those that can make changes, like again, like questioning, like what are you doing to, diversify candidate sources? What are you doing to like against bias? And even amongst your coworkers, like whenever they have to be a part of like an interview panel, like just making sure that we're doing what we can to help fight against that. And yeah, like I said, what I do is like trying to show, like help open up people's eyes to different experiences, identities that are out there, and just be more open and empathetic.
I see Phantasmagorical has asked, any advice for dealing with imposter syndrome? And off the top of my head, my first thought is, if it's at an institution, they likely, or if it's imposter syndrome about your belonging within an institution, they likely want you to feel that way. And that helps to know that, I think, that you shouldn't feel that way, that they are intentionally, maybe not intentionally, but someone may want you to feel that way.
I've never heard that before, and that just kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Almost everyone goes through it. Even the people that trigger those feelings in yourself, like the people that seem to have it all together and they're the ones making you feel like an imposter, they probably have imposter syndrome too. I mean, unless they have like an impossibly high scale narcissism where they think they can do no wrong, almost everybody goes through those feelings. And that really helps a lot and helps, recenter yourself that you aren't the only one.
Yeah. I completely agree. And also it helps actually to like, I actually have a few like networks for like non-cis males that are in programming. And in those networks, we often talk about like imposter syndrome or other similar stuff, like just preventing. And it is actually, it's great. So if you, there are almost always like some kind of network like that near you, I'm sure. So if you can join that kind of network either online or whenever we get to meet in the physical meet world again, because it really helps. But also, I have talked like to also my coworkers, like regardless of gender, about imposter syndrome, and all except one, and he's the stupidest one of us all, but all except one agree that there are two modes of being a programmer. One is I am on top of the world and I know everything about everyone and everything. And the other mode is I have no idea what I'm doing. That is all. That is the whole career of being a programmer. So now you know that, regardless of gender. But of course, there's always the one idiot and that goes like, no, I don't recognize that. And it's like, yeah, well, that's why you're the stupid one as well. So
I feel like
yeah.
I cycle through those phases multiple times a day. Where like I know everything, and then I'm like, God, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
I feel imposter syndrome on the regular, and it's something that, you know, people and mentors have just told me you need to just train yourself not to think, which I haven't figured out how to do that personally. Lately, I've just been trying to like celebrate accomplishments as much as possible, and just, I mean, like I aspire to have the confidence that mediocre white men have. Like that's all I'm trying to get to.
That's a mantra. I tell myself too.
I once saw a tweet that said like, don't tell them about imposter syndrome. Now they think they have imposter syndrome instead of just being mediocre.
Yeah, totally fake it till you make it. And if you're ever unsure, just, maybe have a conversation with someone who's a newbie or is like interested in your field and you realize, oh yeah, I actually do know a lot of stuff and like what I'm talking about. That also helps.
Yeah, it's working in like a large corporation, it's hard to feel like you're actually doing anything meaningful. So trying to, like what Joe mentioned, trying to focus on your own accomplishments or just having someone to talk to too has helped me a lot. But, you know, it's easier said than done to do all those things because, you know, sometimes you just feel like another cog in the wheel.
Absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions in the chat? Or any other thoughts on imposter syndrome? Thank you, Pastel Pastry Chef.
Thank you. That's actually a thing that I thought about. Like, I'm not in a position of change like at my job, but I think that like just by being in the industry, it's actually a part of the change, I guess. Like, I don't really like having like my face on like company photos for lots of stuff, but I just bite the bullet and like, okay, it's fine, I guess, because people need to see my face. Because if they only see white men on the photos of our company, then no one's gonna come. So I guess that's where the change, all of us are the change that is to come. I mean, it does get, the future it's brighter. It is.
Let me see. I saw another question. Where did it go? There we go. That's it. Does anyone have any advice for anyone trying to switch career trajectories to your field?
So I've done this before. I was not originally an organic chemist. I actually hated organic chemistry in college. And now that's what I do, which is kind of weird. But my advice is to maybe find somebody in like the desired trajectory you're trying to go into, and, you know, maybe get them to mentor you, or at least tell you more about what it's like. And then you can kind of get a feel on whether or not it's a good fit, and then just do it. You know, if it's something you want to do, just do it.
Yeah, I'm in the process of trying to do a little bit of shift in my career, actually, and do less work in the lab and do more, even more project management stuff. And, you know, you just have to talk to someone that is in that field you're interested in, and also think about your skills. They don't have to necessarily be, you know, they don't have to necessarily, they don't just apply to your current field. They can be transferred into something else. Like if you're really detail oriented, that can go in a lot of ways. Or if you're really good at planning stuff, or just using, if you're just good at learning new things, learning new software, that's going to take you really far. So don't just limit yourself to staying in one place just because you only know how to do one type of technology.
Yeah, being a good worker is really important. Like being a good people person, being a good worker is really important. Like,
yeah, soft skills are really important, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
My advice that I frequently give to students that are thinking about going to grad school or med school or whatever is, and it sounds trite, but just keep showing up and keep persisting. There are, you know, there were people in my experience when I was a graduate student that objectively were smarter than me, had more skills than me, were better, but they didn't have the persistence and they dropped out of the program, even though objectively they were smarter than me. But I kept coming up and I kept showing up. I kept pressing through, you know, trying the experiments again, even after they failed, and not giving up. And eventually you get there, right? And it's having that ability to just keep driving through, keep pressing on, you know, in spite of the obstacles and in spite of the failures, that will get you there.
Yeah,
Yes,
don't be intimidated by having to
agree.
learn a new thing, because you're always going to be learning no matter what. Like
Oh,
new things happen in your field, you have to stay on top of. Like we're all just doing our best that we can to stay on top and learn new things. So yeah, just do it.
Also, I mentioned in the beginning that I started as a journalist and worked for journalists as a journalist for 8 years in media before coming into tech. So for me, it all depends. I think it depends on where you live, but there are a lot of like everything when it comes to coding. There are everything from like crash courses to vocational school. Some companies even have like internships that will teach you from scratch. So programming is actually one of the jobs that you like. Most programming jobs, at least in Sweden, you don't really need like a really long college degree or something like that right now, because sometimes it is also more of a merit if you can show that you are a good or fast or stubborn learner, or if you can show that you have like the basic understanding of how programming works. So that is more of a merit sometimes. But just check out what local possibilities there are, or online possibilities, and don't give up. Just start programming and you'll get there.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to wrap it up so Haley and Aria can take over the stream and tell us about their panel. I want to sincerely thank everyone on the panel for their thoughts, advice, and just being here. Like I'm an amazing company, and I'm so glad that you're all able to join us. And I want to thank everyone in the chat and in the audience for being a good engaged audience, and for hanging out with us while we talked. So thank you again to everybody, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.